Today we go straight, and our face comes in contact with the ground. Oh yeah, you know where the church is. So you guys can sit here. Huh? No, I mean you can sit on the ground or sit on the ground. The wrong time on the ground for you. You're comfortable. Yeah. No. Yeah, so first the mom is basically not very Arabic means the person. So he's like the equivalent of the priest. Okay? So he does a sermon. And then he leads the prayer, and the rest of the congregation follows on what he does. He recites prayers, from the Quran or book. That's it.
And the sermon is announced and others.
Yes. Yeah. It's the one-way lecture. The women sit, yeah, it's the next one. So no, so what we do is, when they build the mosque, usually, because they do, you see like another section, when they build it from scratch, right? They have like something back, so they need to be separated. So they will be in the back and there'll be a partition. Some places they have like they will be on the second level, like right here, where they can see the sermon also. That's the proper way of doing it. But here you buy a place that's already, it was office or whatever it was.
What is your name?
My name is Jeffrey.
Wait, your name's Ibrahim. Right?
Ibrahim. Here's a chair. I saw him.
How do you keep?
أشهد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. When we look at a specific time frame in the life of Al-Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this specific window of time was the most challenging period of time that the Prophet went through in his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, as he mentioned himself later on. Sayyidah Aisha, our mother, radiallahu anha, asked him if the day of Uhud was the most difficult day that he faced. And he said, no, rather it was the day of Ta'if. One of the things that made that experience so difficult, other than the experience in and of itself being extremely difficult, what makes it even more so is what else happens in the life of the Prophet immediately before the alayhi salatu wasalam. It wasn't just that he went into Ta'if and he was chased out how he was, alayhi salatu wasalam. That in and of itself is enough to be extremely difficult. But what can make a challenge even more trying is when there are already other challenges ongoing in the life of that person. What happened immediately before this? The Prophet loses, alayhi salatu wasalam, Sayyidah Khadija. He loses his uncle, who was his primary political shield, Abu Talib. He loses both of them back to back, within a matter of days of each other. Because of especially Abu Talib passing away, now he's at the mercy of who? The likes of Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, Umayy bin Khalaf. There were already challenges. There's a reason why there were already two migrations to Habasha, to East Africa, to Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. There were already those two migrations because of the heat the Muslims were facing in Mecca. And that was with Abu Talib alive, offering as much protection as he could. Now he's gone. Things were only getting worse and worse and worse because of that. That's why the Prophet went to Ta'if. He has to look for a new home for himself and his community. Now we can appreciate and understand why that day was so difficult for him, why that was so challenging for him. It wasn't just that experience in and of itself, but coupled with what he was already going through. So now it's challenge on top of challenge on top of challenge. And this year, the year that followed, is known as the year of sorrow, the year of grief, in the life of the Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In that time, what was a remedy? What was a medical prescription from a spiritual perspective? What was a medical prescription that Allah Azza wa Jal gave the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam? It was during this time frame that Allah revealed Surah Yusuf to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam. The Prophet was feeling down. He was dealing with so much. And Allah lifted him up. Allah offered a remedy. Allah offered shifa, healing, a cure, to help him heal, alayhi salatu wasallam. It was also after these challenges and experiences, you have the epic instance of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. Look at the healing that Allah is offering the Prophet, how Allah is helping him and supporting him and healing him, making things better. I want to zoom in specifically within the story of Surah Yusuf, within the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. And if the brothers can please scoot up and make room for those in the back, please do so. Make room for others, and Allah will make room for you in Jannah, inshallah. When you look at the story of Surah Yusuf, you find one challenge after another, after another, after another. Just like the Prophet was going through, one challenge after another. Initially, he ends up as this perfectly innocent kid. His own brothers throw him into a well. And then what happens after that? He ends up as being sold as a child slave in Egypt, away from his family, away from everyone he knows, in a foreign land with foreign people. He ends up in the house of Al-Aziz, which was a title. And then within that context, the wife of Al-Aziz tries to seduce him. He ends up going to jail as a perfectly innocent man. You find one challenge after another, after another. When Allah describes this story as the best story that's mentioned, if Allah is describing this as the best story, then you and I should pay attention. Why is this the best story? And you also find the surah being unique. From A to Z, the entire surah is an entire story. You do find a number of different stories in the Quran. Oftentimes within the surah, you have different stories mixed in. You have bits and pieces of different stories mixed in throughout the Quran. But this surah, this story specifically, the entire surah is dedicated to this story. You find one challenge after another, after another, after another. From the human eye, it's look like they're getting worse and worse and worse. And then rock bottom is when he's in jail. Rock bottom is when he's in jail. Look at the beautiful symmetry in the story. You can find images of this online because some people are more visual learners. When you see the image, especially if you're more of a visual learner, then this will become even more. If you look it up, you'll find that the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam is the perfect mirror. You find one challenge happening after another, and then you have the middle point, and then the way the second half of the story unfolds is in perfect symmetry with the first half. The first half, you have points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 7 J's. And then you find 7. So think of 1A, 2A, 3A through 7, for example. And then you have 7B. He's exonerated. His name is clear. The last thing that happened before he ends up in jail, why does he end up in jail? He's accused as an innocent person. And then 7B, he's exonerated. His name is clear. And then he ends up in a position of power. He ends up as Al-Aziz himself. His brothers end up apologizing to him. And then all the way at the end, the dream that he had, this would be called 1A. And then you have everything unfolding, and then you have this perfect image, a perfect mirror on the opposite side of things, how things got better and better and better and better in the exact same order. And then all the way to the end, it mirrors the beginning. At the beginning, he had a dream, he told his father. At the end, he tells his father, this is that dream coming true now. In the middle is what I want to zoom in on a little bit more. What was it in this story? It's such a pivotal role. Allah's latif. Allah has things. Allah's very gentle. It's subtle in this. Allah's very gentle with us. Allah's very good. When you look at the middle point of the story, the lowest of lows, even then, you find something very special in his character, alayhi salam. وَدَخَلَ مَعَهُ السِّجْنَ فَتَيَانِ. Along with him, when he was entered into jail, there were two other young men who were entered along with him. Not 200, not 1,000, Allah mentions two. They had their dreams, they went to him for interpretation, he interpreted them. Those two, the interpretation was, and this is exactly what happened, one out of those two went to time very soon after. Which means how many people? One person. One person. Nabi Yusuf said, he helped this one person. He interpreted his dream. He did him a favor. He did an act of social sadaqah. You never know where Allah's barakah lies. If you make your intention that you just want to help people, you want to do what you can, where you can, when you can, how you can, whatever it has to be, whatever is within your means, you never know where Allah is going to hide his blessings such that eventually when you're in the time of need, just like you have somebody in the time of need to help you. Allah mentions this concept in Surah Al-Anbiya with Prophet and his wife. From the human perspective, what's Allah seeing physically impossible, scientifically impossible? They're both that you find the request that asks, Ya Allah, give us a child. That would be nice to know you've got the lines of paper away. From the human eye, it seems impossible. Don't even ask if it looks impossible. Ask anyways. Ask Allah anyways. And Allah mentions in that part of the surah, one of the secrets, one of the reasons why Allah answered that dua for them, and now they were quick to do good. They were at the forefront of doing good. They wanted to do what they could, who they could, what they could, how they could ascend. They just wanted to be people of piety. They wanted to do good. And eventually they asked Allah for this incredible thing. Sayyidina Zakaria asks Allah, and Allah gives them. Allah didn't only give them a child, Allah gave them a son, Sayyidan wa Hasura wa Nabiyyan min as-Salihin. Just to have a child alone is this incredible miracle. On top of that, Allah makes him righteous, and Allah makes him chaste, and Allah makes him a prophet. Look at how much more Allah gave. What they're asking seems impossible if Allah just gave what they asked, but Allah's ready. When you ask Allah for things that seem so big that it kind of scares you, where you feel hesitant, like, can this really happen? Is it really going to happen? If I ask for this, maybe I should lower my standards in my dua. Don't do that. Ask Allah for whatever it is that's in your heart and connect it with doing something good. Sayyidina Yusuf, what did he do? He helped somebody. He did an act of service. He did a social act of sadaqah. He helped this person, not knowing what's going to end up happening years later. He mentions to that man because the interpretation was that he's going to end up pressing life for the king. Lo and behold, that's exactly what ends up happening. So Yusuf mentions to him, mention me to him so I can get out of this predicament, out of this situation. That man forgets. Shaitan makes that man forget. Years later, the king has a dream. This one king, one night, has this one dream. No one around him can interpret it. But there happened to be, look at Allah's plan, there happened to already be one man from years prior who told Sayyidina Yusuf, about one dream that he had, which was interpreted. And he's the only one who's still living between those two. So he remembers, I know someone who might be able to help. So then he goes to Sayyidina Yusuf and he offers some flattery. Yusuf and he wants to be. Yusuf here is amazingly truthful, honest, good person, and he wants something out of him. So he's trying to offer some flattery. So he goes and he has this request. Can you please interpret this? So he does. And then word goes back to the king, and through that act of service that Sayyidina Yusuf did years prior, years prior, he interpreted that one dream for that one person. Years later, that person was the one connection to connect him with the king. So that he has an in, he has a way to have some time with the king. So after he explains his story, actually first, his name is clear. He's more concerned with that than actually getting out of prison. His name is clear. They admit that he was innocent. He gets out. He ends up having a chance to communicate with the king. After he explains his story, and the king, the way that he responded, I want you on my team. I want you as my right man. I want you on my side of things. I know I can trust you. Does he know that you can trust him? Well, ironically, the challenge that he went through, but the wife of him as he's trying to seduce him, if he can be truthful through that, given his circumstances and background, ironically, that same challenge is what became the main thing was in his favor. So he ends up going and he says, and the story comes full circle. To help someone and then pick it on. There's no room in the bank. Again, make room and allow make room for you and generation. Okay. So the main takeaway that I want to encourage you and I to reflect on today, especially over the next week between today and next Jumaah, to reflect and think, what can I do to help somebody in need? Even if it's something small within my capacity, based on my area of expertise. At the beginning of the surah, when he's mentioning the dream that he had to his father, the implication is he understands what that dream represents. You find him stuttering a little bit, telling his dad as a kid that one day the sun, the moon, i.e. the parents, the mother and father, and then these 11 stars or planets, they're going to melt him. But when he's telling his father, you find him repeating himself a little bit, because as a kid, he's telling his father, one day you're going to melt me as well as the mother figure and others. He notices that he has the skill, he already has this incredible skill set, this very unique talent. So during those trying times, he used what he gave his talent to help somebody just by saying hello. And the look at how things came full circle. We never know where Allah's going to lies. We ask Allah for His blessing in this life and the next. We ask Allah to guide us and forgive us. We ask Allah to gather all of us and for those in His garden and we have the need. Subhanallah, we can have a lesson. Wassalamu alaikum. Walhamdulillah. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. like I just mentioned, the action item that I want to encourage myself and everyone here just to think about it. It doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It doesn't have to be anything above and beyond and, you know, super incredible and shiny and all that stuff is good. You know, there's the expression, Rome wasn't built in a day. Let's make it better when Medina wasn't built in a day. It takes time. But today, what can I do? What can I do to help someone in hopes that Allah will make that come full circle? And is there any reward for ihsan other than ihsan? Allah mentions this specifically in Surah. Allah puts the onus on you and I. If we do what we can to create and produce ihsan, to produce excellence for the sake of Allah, then that's what we're going to get in return. This is Allah's promise. But it's up to us to walk towards Him if we want Him to run towards us. Time and time again, in the Quran and the Sunnah, you find the emphasis placed on the individual to take action first, and then Allah will do more for you. I have to do my part first. And to facilitate that process, hoping that Allah will do much more for me in return. But I have to do my part first. The onus is on me. Many examples of this. If you're thankful, so you have to be thankful first. Then Allah says that it will increase you. And when the most generous says, I will increase you, that should give us hope. Because of who's saying it. The onus is on who? Step one is on me. If I'm thankful, then Allah will do so much more for me in return. And I'm going to add the shukr. I have to take action expressing gratitude. If I do my part first into the soul of water, many examples. Step one, falls on my shoulders and your shoulders. What can we do for the sake of Allah? What are we willing to do for His sake? What are we willing to sacrifice for His sake? I'm here today on behalf of the Islam Foundation for West Africa, which was founded by Dr. Bilal in 1996. So it's been around for over a quarter of a century. Mashallah, may Allah accept all the work that's been done. May Allah accept all the good that's been done. There are all kinds of different opportunities for good, mashallah, that they do in connection with building this city, especially in rural areas, as it relates to building wells, as it relates to healthcare, to there's all kinds of good. All kinds of good. There are Quranic schools that are being built and sponsored by people on this side of the world who are not even originally from West Africa. As one sister, West Africa, originally from the East Valley, Sister Chana Patel, in the Sacramento area. She had a Quran school built and she sponsored it, and she's been quite a lot of mercy on me, but think of how much good she continues to gather all the good deeds that she continues to benefit from, because she had the foresight and the vision. We have to put in work today to prepare for tomorrow. It's a lot of time we're just we have to be on. What we do today for tomorrow? It's human nature. We often get very caught up in the dunya, we get caught up in different responsibilities, and there's so much going on for everyone. But this is certainly a reminder that if we can do something to help others, if we can go and do it ourselves, then let's help other people to go and do that good on our behalf. It takes two to tango, as the saying goes. There's a need for the financial support, and there's the need for the human resources. There's a connection between the two. Even in the hadith from the Prophet, when he mentioned that it's only permissible to envy two types of people. Knowledge, deed, and they teach it. It's financially generous. For the human resources, financial resources, those are the these work together. So I want to really ask you today, if you can, if you can humbly and kindly stop by the expense people, please give what you can. So even if there's a lot of good expense doing, specifically today, we're looking to gather support from your generous community, mashallah, specifically in connection with orphan support. It's not a coincidence that Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam It's not a coincidence. The final messenger of Allah sent to mankind himself wasn't with him. So later on, when he's given the mantle of being a prophet of Allah, a messenger of Allah, think of it this way: he can't forget where he came from. He was raised as an orphan. He was familiar with that struggle. He was familiar with those challenges firsthand. And then later, when he is given this mantle, he didn't forget about the orphans. He actually taught us that the one who supports an orphan will be like this with me in the hereafter. I need to ask myself, what am I willing to do to come closer to the Prophet? The onus is on me. He's done his part. Now it's up to me to think and reflect. Am I doing my part? Am I trying to do my part? What am I willing to do? What am I willing to give? If I truly value ending up that close with the Prophet and not able to you after, that's what I need. I need to reflect and think, okay, how serious am I about truly wanting that? I can claim that, of course, I want to be with the Prophet. But then if there are these means and resources that I'm not using them, he taught us hacks. He taught us ways. This is a shortcut. Just do this, and then you get so much more in return. That's up to me to do what I want. We ask Allah for guidance, forgiveness. We ask Allah to make it easy for us to connect with the Quran and to benefit from it. We ask Allah to make it easy for us to connect with Surah Yusuf and to benefit from it. You never know. Maybe you giving literally even the smallest amount today to help one orphan. Maybe it becomes, symbolically speaking, maybe that becomes the thing that has 20 years from now. Maybe you forgot about it. But then years later, you're going through a difficult time, you find, oh, I'm helping you, and you recognize it's normal. It's something from people, this is something from Allah. You start to think and reflect with us. Maybe something was given to help someone. Maybe they make them help. Maybe they ask me, like, oh, this is food in my mouth. You know, it's helping me to especially give them, bless them, give them ease, help them, protect them, forgive them, bless their family. To helping other people's children, other children. Give to an orphan as if that's the Prophet you're giving to. Now it's a sense of yes. I'm going to take it seriously, and I want to give not just clothing, the best clothing. So on and so forth. We ask Allah for التوفيق. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين وأقم الصلاة. Allah Akbar. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Announcement. We have family wedding next week on Friday, starting at 7 o'clock. Sheikh Bilal is going to be presenting. So he's registered. We ask that you register before next Thursday. Registration will close next Thursday. The other thing is we have a new ways hanging out. Starting right now in 4 p.m. for all the page next to one.
Yeah, it's a.